you, Mark. Good morning, everyone. I'm Anna Johnson, and like Mark said, I am the Senior Economic Analyst for the Oregon Employment Department. Today, I am going to talk to y'all about the labor impacts of the pandemic recession and how the recovery has been looking so far. I do have some construction going on in my house, one of the hazards of working from home. So if you hear some noises in the background, I'm sorry about that, but we're gonna power through. So I think it'll be okay. Yeah, so I'm not a transportation expert, but I do know a little bit about labor markets, and I hope I can provide some good background information for you guys to kind of give you an idea of what's been going on in Oregon over the past really tumultuous 18 months. So let's just jump into it. In 2020, in April 2020, Oregon's unemployment rate shot up from a near record low to a record high, basically overnight from about 3.5% in the beginning of 2020 to 13.2%. This was a record high during the Great
Actually, you're breaking up a
Recession.
little bit. Maybe if you
The
turn.
unemployment rate reached 11. Should I turn my video off?
Yeah, if you
Maybe that
turn
will
your
help.
video off, that could help. Yeah.
Okay, how about now? Am I still breaking up?
No, that sounds better.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, but since April, our unemployment rate has been steadily decreasing. And in September, it reached 4.7%, very similar to the US. It is back to, although we're not back to the record lows that we were seeing prior to the pandemic, we are below the long run average going back to 1976, below 6%. So we're making good progress. And just a little bit of background information, the unemployment rate is based on a survey of households, so it includes self-employed people and farm workers, and it has nothing to do with whether or not you're receiving unemployment insurance. You're considered unemployed if you are not working and you are available to work and currently looking for work. So in September, about 100,000 Oregonians were unemployed. This is a really remarkable improvement from the worst of the labor market impacts of the COVID recession, when 270,000 Oregonians were jobless in April 2020. However, there's still ground to make up to approach the average of 82,000 Oregonians unemployed during the 2017-2019 tight labor market of the economic expansion. And then the kind of along with just the total number of unemployed persons changing really dramatically, the reasons why people were unemployed has been changing over the course of the recession and recovery. At the beginning of the pandemic, you can see most people who are unemployed were considered job losers, as opposed to entrants or job leavers. And that number has been, the number of people who have lost their job has been steadily dropping throughout the recovery. And really interestingly, the number of people who have left their jobs voluntarily has been increasing, and it currently represents 14% of the unemployed in September. Now I'm going to switch to jobs numbers, and this comes from a survey of Oregon's business establishments asking about their payroll jobs. So it's a different survey than what we use to calculate the unemployment rate. So the numbers look a little different. So while we've been experiencing a decline in the unemployment rate, in September, we had a really extreme stop in job growth. This graph is pretty unreadable, but I like to show it because it shows the monthly gains or losses in Oregon, and it really illustrates how extreme job losses of little red bars over here. This was the Great Recession, and now it's, it doesn't even look that bad compared to April of 2020. And the job growth that we've been experiencing since then is record high levels. But after we were averaging about 10,000 job gains a month from January to August, the loss of 200 jobs in September was a really notable slowdown. But this picture kind of looks different from one area of Oregon's economy to the next. So if we look at the industries individually, it shows a really different picture. By September 2021, Oregon had regained 72% of the jobs they lost in spring. Some industries are fully recovered and have expanded to make up. So in this graph, the dark blue part of the bar represents the initial deficit that the industry lost in spring 2020. And then the green part of that bar shows how much of that they have recovered. So leisure and hospitality down at the bottom is still, has a ways to make up from the really extreme job losses that they saw. But these industries up here with the bright blue bar have surpassed their levels that they saw in February 2020. And those industries are professional and technical services, which is companies that provide a mix of architectural, engineering, computer design, and other services, transportation, warehousing and utilities, and state government. So if we look at transportation, warehousing, utilities, it's been one of the few that has been gaining significant jobs throughout the pandemic. And really surged during 2020 while many people turned to online shopping and delivery, and we needed more truck drivers, we needed more warehousing to store those all those delivery items in, and really stood out in stark contrast to most of the rest of Oregon's economy in 2020. This sector added 1,000 jobs in September, and they have almost 4,000 more jobs than they did prior to the recession. And as holiday shopping starts to pick up at the end of this year, it's quite possible that the job growth in this industry will continue to be really strong. Another important industry that's been really affected during the pandemic and the recovery is healthcare and social assistance. We kind of jokingly, but not quite a joke, refer to this industry as recession proof, but at the beginning of the pandemic, that was proven very incorrect. And as people kind of shut down like non-emergency services and routine checkups and dentist offices were closed, the sector lost a lot of jobs. And after a pretty strong initial gain after spring of 2020, it's been really flat over the last couple months, which is concerning to a lot of people because we're still in a pandemic and healthcare providers are very important. But it looks a little different across the different sectors. While they're all still down from their February 2020 employment, ambulatory services, which is like the doctors of offices, dentists, chiropractors, other specialists, have been adding jobs and have been steadily increasing pretty consistently. Hospitals, however, have had a slight job loss over the year. And then nursing and residential care facilities have lost about 3,000 jobs over the competition for workers is really complicating hiring for healthcare places right now. And nursing and residential care facilities in particular, they tended to lose workers to hospitals prior to the pandemic because of wages usually, and there was a lot of COVID exposure in those locations early in the pandemic too. And I don't have any data on this, but it's possible that there may be a reduced demand for workers if a large number of families opt to not place their loved ones in a nursing care facility because of the pandemic at this time. And then another big one is the leisure and hospitality industry. They've been hiring at a good pace with an average of 3,500 jobs a month so far in 2021. It has regained 62% of the jobs lost in spring 2020. And they're working their way back from the 111,000 jobs that they lost in the spring of 2020. And this industry tended to lose workers to other industries prior to the recession and the pandemic. There was a lot of turnover, and they haven't been losing more workers to other industries. That still kind of turnover is happening. But it's a challenge to lose those workers to other industries when it's already hard to find people for all of your jobs. But to keep it in perspective, even though they've only gained back 62% of the jobs that they lost, they've hired as much in the last 9 months as they did in the 64 months before the recession. So there's a lot of competition for workers. And I think a lot of people really expected for hiring to pick up really quickly when the federally expanded unemployment insurance benefits ended. But we did take a look at the group of unemployment insurance claimants who were expected to lose their benefits at the beginning of February. And if the 8,400 workers who were in accommodation and food services before becoming unemployed went back to that industry after they lost their pandemic unemployment insurance benefits, that would only fill about 20% of that industry's gap to get back to a full jobs recovery. So the employment recovery compared to the US, where this is shows employment trends indexed to January 2020. And we've been moving, following a really similar trend to the US, who added 194,000 jobs in September, which would have been a pretty typical month of job growth before the pandemic, but it's a really significant slowdown from the 1.1 million jobs added in July and the 366,000 added in August. But our winter growth really slowed down in compared to the US in the end of 2020, but we've been picking up and moving in a similar direction as the US since then. And another kind of difference in this recession and recovery, there's been some really big changes in the average hourly wages. This is for private non-farm jobs only. And this is the 12-month moving average adjusted for inflation. But at the beginning of pandemic, we saw average wages rise, but this was mostly because the jobs that were lost in spring of 2020 were some of the lowest paying jobs, which really drove up the average. But as those jobs started to come back, the average continued to rise and keep increasing. But over the last few months, we're starting to see those wages decrease again. And in September, the average hourly wage was about $30.57. And so that's kind of the employment and unemployment perspective. And I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about business perspective. Each quarter, we survey private employers for all industries and areas of the state to ask about their job vacancies that they are actively trying to fill. So in the summer quarter, Oregon businesses reported almost 107,000 vacancies. This was a total job openings increase of 9% from the spring and 130% from the summer of 2020. And this is the highest number of job vacancies we've seen in Oregon since the beginning of the survey in 2013. In spring 2021, the number of vacancies reached the previous record of 97,800. And before that, the high was 66,000 vacancies in the summer of 2017. And while we ask about if they have any vacancies, we also ask for some information about those vacancies. And most of them were for full-time permanent positions. Education beyond high school was required for about 27% of summer vacancies. And in line with what we saw in the previous slide, the average starting wage reported in the summer was $19.19, but that was a slight inflation adjusted decrease from summer 2020. And we also ask employers if they're having a difficult time filling the vacancies that they had. And if they are difficult to fill, we ask them to give us an open-ended response as to why. And overall, 78% of vacancies were considered difficult to fill in the summer, which was another record high for the series. And to illustrate how hiring troubles are in Oregon and around the US, if we look at the unemployed to job vacancy ratio for the US and for Oregon in the summer, it was there was one unemployed person per job vacancy, which makes, again, kind of like illustrates the competition that there is for workers right now. For all the job openings, there's only one available person who is actively looking for work. And there's all sorts of things that can complicate that, such as, you know, where your skills are needed and the experience that you have and what employers are looking for. They can really make it hard to find workers. And then, but businesses were hiring in industries across the state. Healthcare and social assistance was had the highest number of vacancies, which has been the case for most of the past 23 quarters. The leisure and hospitality industry had the next highest number of vacancies, and so did retail, trade, and manufacturing. And employers reported vacancies in more than 270 different occupations. The ones with the most vacancies in the summer were retail salespersons, restaurant cooks, personal care aides, truck drivers, and maids and housekeeping cleaners. And for the reasons why their vacancies were difficult to fill, many employers reported, or most employers reported, that it was just a general lack of applications or a lack of qualified candidates that were making hiring for their vacancies very difficult. And then and separately, we have been tracking over the past couple quarters how many employers mention, or how many vacancies mention high UI benefits or COVID as being the reason for the difficulty hiring. And in the summer, that was about 12% of the difficult to fill vacancies mentioned UI benefits or COVID. And most of them mentioned UI benefits and not COVID. But that really speaks to people maybe having a financial cushion, which can affect workers' choices and impact their lives amid this like ongoing pandemic. And yeah, so we've kind of reached this. Everything about the past 18 months has been historic, unprecedented, all the words that we've heard a million times, but it is true. And we had an extreme amount of job losses. We've had a really fast recovery, and it's looked really different from a lot of previous recessions. I think in coming out of recession, many employers thought it would be like the previous recession, where there'd be a lot of people out of work and a lot of people that needed work, and it would be pretty easy to hire for their open position, but that's turned out to not be the case for sure. And that's all I have for y'all today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, we have any hands raised? I can start with a question. I'm wondering if you noticed, or if you have data on any shifts in the types of people who are working and taking jobs in different industries, like in terms of their education level or things like that?
Um, no, we don't have any. We usually have annual data on that, so we haven't seen anything look too different in 2020. Um, I think maybe there might, I would think maybe there might be some changes in the ages of workers. I know the McDonald's down the street from me has a big sign up that says now hiring 14 to 15-year-olds. Um, and at the beginning of the pandemic, we did see a really sharp change in the gender breakout of the labor force. Women were leaving the labor force and were unemployed at much higher rates than men. But over the recovery, that has really equaled out.
Yeah, I also wonder if well, I'll give a quick one, then there's a hand up. With more, it's like a worker's market, more jobs available, if people might be able to find jobs closer to home. So if that would affect commuting distance, I don't know. That's just a speculation. I don't know if
Absolutely.
you've seen
Yeah,
that.
I think, yeah, we we about people who commute out of their county to work based on where they live, which doesn't necessarily get at to whether they're working closer to home or not in a more granular level. But I think the general idea of more worker choice is really true, which is why employers are having a hard time, because when every business on the block is hiring, they have the opportunity to pick, which maybe wasn't the case before.
Okay. I see Dennis Yee has hand up. Dennis?
Morning. I have two questions. Wondering if Anna, you could try to answer or address what the department has been looking at. The prospects of long-term work from home. Is the employment outlook changed? That is, more people will either do a hybrid or work from home exclusively as a result that businesses have learned that this works. And then secondly, my second question is about daycare and the intermittent nature of schooling because of COVID restrictions, where someone gets infected on the bus and the entire school or parts of the school are closed down again, uh, and the lack of daycare options perhaps holding back employment right now for let's call it marginally displaced workers right now.
Yeah, those
So
are two great questions. Thanks. Yeah, so for work from home, at the beginning of the pandemic, the census was asking kind of monthly, are you working from home because of COVID? And obviously that shot up at the beginning of the pandemic and it's kind of steadied. I think it's around like 6 or 8% in Oregon recently. And Oregon has, which is a little higher than the US average, and Oregon's always had a little bit higher work from home than average. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to watch in the future because it's really going to vary by industry, and it probably will vary a lot by income level. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think we keep saying like, oh, at the, in 2021, once all the vaccines are rolled out, we'll see how this kind of shakes out. And then that didn't happen as we expected. The state government hasn't gone back into the office as a whole yet. Yeah, so I don't know. I think each individual employer is going to have big difference. And then your other question was about schooling and childcare, which is a huge impact, which has been really important. It's always really important, but there's a couple different things going on. One, I didn't show the industry graph for this, but childcare childcare industry and childcare workers has really dropped over the pandemic, and they haven't gained a lot of those jobs back. So there's a decrease in the supply of childcare workers. Schools are having a really hard time hiring. And then there's the intermittent nature of COVID restrictions changing, individual schools closing down or not closing down because of exposures. So a lot of the census does a pulse survey, and they ask people why they are not urgently seeking work right now. And childcare concerns are one of the major reasons why. So it really is, I think, one of the biggest impacts that's keeping people out of the labor force and making it more difficult for employers to find workers. Because if you have to stay at home with your kid, it can really, and you need to be in the office or you need to be working during certain hours, it can really affect your availability and just make it impossible to work. And then I see there's a question, do you have the percentage of people who are work from home due to COVID broken out by urban areas? Yes, I think you can. Josh Lehner at the Office of Economic Analysis, he has some great blog posts on this. And I think I don't remember the percentages, but I know that Portland had higher percentages than other urban areas and the rural areas. And then Becky, are there indications of wages rising to attract workers? Yes, some. We were seeing that a lot kind of beginning of this year and end of last year, in that private average hourly wages, there was pretty steady increase. But that's kind of started to wane a little bit. In the job vacancy survey, when you adjust for inflation, the average wages that employers were offering for their vacancies was lower than it was last summer. And then do we collect attitudinal data on workers wanting to change industries? No, I don't think we do. No, not that I know of. Yes, thank you, Becky. Yeah.
Yeah, you sent that to me. I asked you a few months ago, and it's like, and I have this. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have questions? Okay. Well, thank